From a distance, it looks harmless. Just a quiet, round pool of blue in the middle of the New Mexico desert. Locals call it the Blue Hole of Santa Rosa. To anyone driving past, it could be just another roadside pond, a place to cool off, let the kids splash around, maybe take a quick photo and move on. But that's only what you see from the surface. Far below that calm, glassy water, there's a heavy metal grate bolted into the rock. And behind that grate is the mouth of a vast flooded cave system that disappears into the darkness under the desert. That barrier wasn't always there, and people don't drop a steel gate over an underwater tunnel for no reason. Something happened here, more than once. In this story, we're going to walk through the tragedies that forced officials to seal that entrance, and then ask a chilling question. What if someone decided to slip past the grate anyway? To answer that, we first need to understand what the Blue Hole really is and how it became so important in the first place. About 100 miles east of Albuquerque, out in the wide open plains of New Mexico, sits the small city of Santa Rosa. On its edge is a swimming spot that, at first glance, barely stands out. A few rocks, a couple of trees, and a circular pool that looks no different from any other desert spring. But the color gives it away. The water is a deep, impossibly clear blue, the kind of blue you don't see in shallow ponds. It's the first hint that this hole goes far deeper than it appears, and that what lies beneath it is anything but ordinary. Today, the Blue Hole is one of the most well-known dive sites in the United States. It sits right along historic Route 66, that iconic highway laid down in the 1920s, which turned the spot into a natural stopover for travelers. But its role as a desert oasis predates asphalt by centuries. Before the highway, wagon trails passed through here, and this pool provided water for cattle and exhausted travelers pushing across the dry country. And farther back still, long before written records, native communities relied on this spring for drinking water, bathing, and relief from the heat. How far that history stretches, no one can say. The Blue Hole is a natural artesian well, a pressurized spring fed by deep underground water. That pressure forces out an astonishing volume, roughly 3,000 gallons every minute, enough to fill an Olympic-sized pool in under 3 hours. The entire Blue Hole refreshes itself about every 6 hours, which is why the water stays so clear and holds steady at 60 feet, or about 17, no matter the season. Its shape is just as unusual. At the surface, the opening measures about 80 feet across. Descend through the water column and it narrows like an hourglass, then widens again until the base reaches nearly 130 feet across at a depth of roughly 80 feet. Down on the bottom you'll find rubble, boulders, the usual things, but also bones, a crucifix, and on the eastern side, a small, almost unremarkable opening. Today that opening is sealed by a heavy metal grate. Behind it is the entrance to a sprawling water-filled cave system carved over millennia. Underground water doesn't travel in straight lines. It dissolves softer rock, opens chambers here, squeezes tight passageways there. You never know whether a spring leads into a cathedral-sized room or a maze of claustrophobic tunnels. Most people, understandably, never wonder what's inside, but cave divers do. And decades ago, before that grate was ever installed, curiosity was enough to pull more than a few divers toward that dark opening. And that's where the story turns, into the first tragedy that forced Santa Rosa to seal the cave. Every year, thousands of diving students come to the Blue Hole for one simple reason. It's as close to a perfect training pool as nature can make. The water is consistently clear, the temperature barely changes, and there are no currents tugging you around. For beginners, it feels like a giant open-air classroom, quiet, predictable, safe. That's what drew a group from the University of Oklahoma here in March of 1976. 10 students and their instructor arrived mid-morning with a straightforward assignment: shoot underwater photographs for a class project. By about 10:30 a.m., everyone was geared up and slipping into the water. Among them were 2 students, Mike and David, who entered right alongside the rest of the group. Before anyone descended, the instructor gave a firm warning. Don't linger on the bottom too long, and absolutely do not enter the cave opening on the east side. With that, the class began their dive. But for a couple of students, a warning doesn't eliminate curiosity. It amplifies it. As Mike and David made their way down to the bottom, exploring the silty floor and the scattered debris, they eventually reached the small 4-foot opening that marked the cave entrance. They exchanged a signal. Curiosity won, and together they slipped inside. The cave drops about 15 feet just past the entrance, and the difference is immediate. The space tightens, the walls turn jagged, sand and gravel cover the floor. The water, once crystal clear in the open basin, becomes darker, heavier, unsettled. At the bottom of that drop, the cave splits. One tunnel rises behind them into a dead end. The other slopes forward, branching into multiple rooms. And this is where the real danger of an untrained cave dive begins: the silt. Most open water divers never think about the trail they leave behind as they swim. A gentle kick or a careless fin stroke is all it takes to lift a cloud of fine sediment from the floor. You don't notice it, not at first, because you're facing forward. But the moment you turn around, the exit has vanished into a thick brown fog. As Mike and David pushed farther inside, their fin strokes stirred up more and more silt. By the time they tried to turn back, the path behind them was gone, swallowed by total opacity. That panic is what kills most lost divers. Breathing accelerates. You start flailing, bumping into rock ceilings and walls, each movement kicking up even more silt. And then, at the worst possible moment, your next inhale feels tight, drawing air through a straw. The tank is empty, and there's no route home. Up above, the rest of the group eventually realized something was wrong. Mike and David hadn't resurfaced. Within hours, rescue divers were called in. That same afternoon, the first search team entered the cave, laying a 100-foot guideline so they could feel their way back if the water silted out. They found Mike's body near the entrance to one of the side chambers. David was still missing. Cave diving science in the 1970s was primitive, and the rescue team was mostly volunteers. Conditions were so dangerous that many refused to go deeper. Those who did pressed on over the next several days, reaching depths of about 181 feet, more than double the depth of the entrance. In one chamber, a diver shined a powerful light downward and still couldn't see the bottom. Worse, every exhaled bubble struck the ceiling and knocked loose chunks of rock. One diver was hit by a stone, nearly a foot wide. Another brushed past a slab the size of a small boulder in complete darkness. On March 14th, the 4th day, the search was halted. Changing pressure conditions had turned the water into a cloudy soup, making further dives impossible. A 300-pound metal grate was lowered into place over the entrance to prevent anyone else from descending. More than a month later, the grate was briefly removed so the search could resume. David's body was eventually found at a depth of 130 feet, not nearly as deep as the team had gone, but hidden among countless side rooms and crevices. After his recovery, the grate was sealed again. It would stay there for nearly 40 years. And for decades, that's where the story ended, until a new generation of divers asked the city for permission to reopen the cave. 37 years passed before anyone touched the grate again. Then, a group called the ADM Exploration Foundation approached the city of Santa Rosa with an unusual request. They wanted permission to reopen the sealed entrance, map the cave system, and finally understand what lay beyond the point where the 1976 search had ended. After months of planning and paperwork, the city agreed. The grate was unbolted and lifted away for the first time in decades. But the divers were met with a surprise the moment they looked inside. Instead of a clear passage, the entrance was clogged with an enormous mass of rocks and debris. Only later did they learn why. At some point, the U.S. Army had dumped 2 truckloads of stone down into the opening, either as reinforcement or as a simple way to ensure no one slipped past the grate again. Whatever the intent, it left ADM with a massive excavation job. Before they could explore anything, they had to dredge silt, haul out rubble, and clear a usable path. And even after days of work, one giant boulder remained wedged across the entrance like a cork. It couldn't be shifted safely, and that single obstruction halted the entire project for another 3 years. By 2016, the path had finally been opened enough for a proper survey. ADM assembled a world-class team, highly trained cave divers with years of technical experience. Leading the effort was Mike Young, a legend in the cave diving community. Alongside him was Navy diver Shane Thompson, who would help lay the guideline and document the interior. Over the next several days, Mike and Shane pushed deeper into the system, installing fixed lines and methodically mapping each chamber. By March 26th, they had reached a depth of about 195 feet, roughly 59 meters. They could have kept going, but the passage ahead was jammed with interlocking boulders. Moving them would be risky, exhausting, and possibly catastrophic, so the team called that their practical limit. Below about 140 feet, the cave was nothing like a smooth tunnel. The corridors were choked with massive slabs, some as large as cars, creating a labyrinth of tight chasms and unpredictable squeeze points. In many places, there wasn't enough room to turn around. In others, even brushing the wrong rock could shift weight onto the unstable piles around them. Mike was the only one who could pass through the tightest restriction at first. It wasn't until the day before the final dive that Shane managed to force his way through the same bottleneck. And so, for the last planned dive, they worked out a safer strategy. Shane would accompany Mike only as far as the second narrow point. From there, Shane would wait while Mike continued alone, just far enough to check the deepest section one more time and remove the guideline fixed at the bottom. It was a cautious plan, but once they entered the restrictions, caution would only take them so far, and the next dive would turn into something no one expected. According to investigators, Mike and Shane were searching for additional passageways when Mike passed through a narrow restriction into a small chamber. Shane was not supposed to follow. For reasons that remain unclear, Shane entered the cave anyway. That single deviation immediately collapsed the safety margin. As Mike began exiting along the guideline, silt was kicked up, reducing visibility to 0. In the darkness, Shane grabbed the line and pulled on it forcefully, strong enough to rip it out of Mike's hands. At that point, both divers lost visual reference, orientation, and shared situational awareness. As Mike searched blindly for the line, Shane surfaced from below, and both divers became wedged in the narrow passage. Mike attempted to descend and reposition to turn around. Shane, however, continued upward, made a wrong turn, and entered an unmapped offshoot, a dead-end passage that did not appear on any survey. This was the final separation. By the time Mike located Shane again, it was too late. Shane had died inside the unmapped offshoot. Investigators later confirmed that the passage led nowhere, a structural trap with no exit and no room to maneuver. Shane's body was recovered the following day. From an investigative standpoint, the failure chain was clear and unusually short. The dive plan was violated. A confined space eliminated passing or turning options. Silt-out caused total loss of visibility. The guideline was forcibly lost. An unmapped passage removed the possibility of recovery. According to police statements, once Shane took the wrong turn, the outcome was irreversible. The incident reinforced a core principle of cave diving. In overhead environments, navigation errors are not mistakes, they are endpoints. So the conclusion was unanimous. The system was too unstable, too unpredictable, too lethal. The city and the ADM team agreed to seal the cave permanently. A new grate was lowered into place, securing the entrance once more. Above that grate, though, the blue hole remains exactly what most visitors see: a beautiful, reliable training site for open water divers and a popular stop for swimmers and travelers along Route 66. The water's still clear, still cool, still inviting. But just below, behind the steel barrier, lies a reminder of why some parts of the natural world are meant to stay closed, and why this cave, despite decades of fascination, would never be opened again. The blue hole is beautiful on the surface, but its history reminds us how easily wonder and danger can coexist. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. If you found this video compelling, feel free to like it and share your thoughts about this place in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks again for watching, and as always, I hope to see you in the next one.